All right, yeah. Yeah, carrying on with this. Let's go.
Georg Hegel was a German philosopher who came up with a basic system for achieving the goals of the Illuminati called the Hegelian dialectic. This system is based on 3 steps. In step 1, a rogue government will create the problem that harms or even kills its own citizens. This deception is known as a false flag attack. In step 2, a rogue government will control the reaction to the problem which it created by typically blaming it on an enemy or some aspect of its own society over which it seeks more control. This is why the term false flag attack is so named. In step 3, a rogue government will offer the solution to the problem which it created. This solution is typically a war or a system of regulations. The solution would usually not be accepted by the public had the rogue government not created the crisis and controlled the reaction to it in the first place. A government which seeks increasing control can keep pushing society to accept its agenda by following its.
You literally can see that what he just explained play out in just about every story. Like I say, whether it's controlled or not, the actual controlling of the narrative and then using it to, yeah, either start a war or um push policies through. It's a bit like what Patrice O'Neill says when he says when trainers or sneakers used to be like $40, then they put them up to like $300, and then dropped them back down to 150. He's like, and people kind of went, thank God they're 150 now. He's like, but they've jumped up $120 from where they did. They just jumped it up really far, had the reaction of everyone saying, I'm not buying them, then bring it back down to something much higher than it was previously, and people think they've actually had a good deal out of it.
Series of problems, reactions, and solutions which it planned all along. The significance of the Hegelian dialectic is not how evil it is, but rather how often governments choose to follow it. There has not been a major war in the 20th and 21st centuries that does not follow the Hegelian dialectic. Though his family converted to Christianity, Karl Marx became a Satanist during his university years. In a poem entitled Pale Maiden, Marx wrote, "Thus haven I forfeited, I know it full well. My soul, once true to God, is chosen for hell." Over time, Marx became a 32nd degree Mason. Karl Marx met up with German philosopher Friedrich Engels. Engels joined a revolutionary group 10 years earlier, founded by Giuseppe Mazzini. It was Engels who would feed Karl Marx physically and intellectually for life. Marx published the Communist Manifesto in 1848, based on a draft from Engels. The manifesto was commissioned.
I know that's funny when people talk about communism and that, and then you bring up Karl Marx, and they don't know who Karl Marx is. They've never even heard of the Communist Manifesto. They're just saying it because it's what has been pushed on them through social media, the college, whatever. But the amount of times people talk about communism, 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 and then you say Karl Marx, they ain't got a clue who Karl Marx is.
Communist League in London, whose history can be traced back to the Jacobin Club and the Illuminati. The foundations of communism
Jacobin.
are identical to the goals of the Illuminati. Karl Marx was always looking for money. He found it when Nathan Rothschild gave Marx several £1,000s to finance the cause of socialism through the Hegelian dialectic. Marx wrote Das Kapital in 1867, which became known as the Bible of the working class. While his Bible called for the working class to rise up and overthrow the financial bourgeoisie, Marx evidently did not practice what he preached. In an 1864 letter to his uncle, Marx announced that he made £400 on the stock exchange. Nikolai Lenin picked up where Karl Marx left off. Lenin admired Mikhail Bakunin, who wrote, "The evil one is the satanic revolt against divine authority. Satan, the eternal rebel, the first free thinker and the emancipator of worlds. While attending university, Lenin became a Mason.
See, this is where this is interesting because I've never really thought of Karl Marx. Like, I know Karl Marx through his writing, and then I learned the history of, like I say, Lenin and where that ideology went. And but I used to be into Karl Marx, so I knew Karl Marx, all of them. But yeah, saying it's satanic, there is a kind of having like a little understanding of the Bible now. I can see where you would say Karl Marx is that ideology is satanic. It's especially with um like it breaks major things in the Bible, like the seven deadly sins: envy, greed. Like, yeah, and it works as a nice idea, but it's like it runs off of everybody gives everything to the government, and then they will spread it out evenly. It's just that second bit that never ever happens. Everybody gives everything to the government and they keep it, and everyone basically starves.
Stopped by Andrew Jackson and delayed by Abraham Lincoln, the international bankers finally seized control of the financial system of the United States. On December 23, 1913, the Federal Reserve Act passed through Congress when most congressmen were home for Christmas. President Wilson promised to sign the Federal Reserve Act in exchange for campaign contributions. This unconstitutional act allowed a private group of international bankers to print pieces of paper as money which would be loaned out to the government at interest. Leading directly or indirectly through their agents, the most prominent members of this group were J.P. Morgan, J.D. Rockefeller, Jacob Schiff, and Max and Paul Warburg. Every member of this group was connected in different ways to the Rothschilds. The international bankers wasted little time in doing what they do best: finance wars. The bankers of Europe and America found a way to ignite the growing tension between Germany and the Anglo-American establishment for the economic and cultural dominance of Europe. Most people know that the flashpoint of World War I along the Western Front was the torpedoing of the Lusitania on May 7, 1915. What most people don't know is how the operations of the Lusitania were engineered to provoke this war. British intelligence broke the German war code in December 1914. This meant that the First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, knew where every German U-boat was in the English Channel. The Lusitania slowed to await the arrival of its military escort through the channel. Churchill ordered the escort to return to port. The Lusitania was crawling alone through a war zone. A private letter from Churchill removes any doubt as to whether he intended for the Lusitania to be sunk. Roughly 1,200 people lost their lives in an engineered event designed to start a war. The Germans claimed that the Lusitania was carrying arms from America to be used by Britain against Germany. 93 years later, this claim has been proven to be true. The English-speaking press, controlled by the Rothschild-owned news services in Europe, published the claim that the barbaric Germans had attacked an unarmed passenger ship. This ignores the fact that the German government placed warnings in New York newspapers reminding passengers that the ship would be sailing into a war zone. The best example of how the Illuminati bankers funded both sides of World War I was given through Max and Paul Warburg. Paul Warburg's firm of Kuhn, Loeb and Company was in charge of Liberty Loans, which helped finance the American military. Max Warburg's firm...
Yeah, see, this is where, because I was thinking that it makes sense Churchill doing that to get America to join them. But then if they are, that's what I thought, if they're bringing weapons and military aid, then I don't see why Churchill would want that to be hit unless he was given the okay from someone else that they will use it to get in, if you know what I mean. Otherwise, why would Churchill want to sink something that's bringing aid just for the sake of it, unless he had, yeah, an insurance that, yeah, this was going to propel them in. But that this is the thing as well. The Lusitania is kind of like an accepted one. The Gulf of Tonkin, I always get it wrong. I'm sure it's the Gulf of Tonkin, is another one that's just accepted. But then it happens now, and you go, nah, it's probably legit. Do you know what I mean? You just, even though these older ones are accepted, and then you go on to the USS Liberty, it's kind of the same thing as that. How the American government and Israel come together to squash that, even though that one's more crazy. You can kind of understand the Lusitania for the fact that they wanted to get America into the war. And that was kind of a big part. And then, well, obviously, yeah, but that was a big part of it. But the USS Liberty is like, that one is just bizarre. That I still can't think of any reason why Israel hit that ship. It says to hold back war crimes, but if they're that powerful that they can kill them and then they can kill Americans and get the American government to cover it up, uh, yeah, why would they worry about America releasing information they have if America's going to cover up killing their own people? Like, that's the craziest story I've heard, is the USS Liberty, in terms of this type of false, well, yeah, false flag type of thing.
Of M.M. Warburg and Company helped finance the German military. The Rothschilds were unable to control Russia because of the Tsar until World War I, when the alliance between the European and American bankers was complete. Jacob Schiff spent $20 million in gold to finance the Russian Revolution through Leon Trotsky, who was exiled in style in New York. Of the 384 commissars that were to make up the new Russian government, 264 had come from the United States. When the ship carrying the men and materials for the revolution were seized at the port of Halifax by Canadian authorities, President Wilson secured their release by stating that if they weren't let go, the US would not enter the war. Lenin, exiled in Switzerland, promised to make peace with Germany if he overthrew Russia's temporary government. He was placed in a sealed railway car with $5 million in German gold and was sent to Russia. When the elections were held in November 1917, Lenin's communists received only 24% of the vote. Lenin had to use force in order to represent the people. The United States stepped in with enormous amounts of food and relief supplies as famine gripped Russia while Lenin took control of it. This opened the door for American industrialists and financiers like J.D. Rockefeller to build the infrastructure of Russia. The net effect was that America continued to support the communist revolution. This support was extended as power was transferred from Lenin to Stalin in spite of Stalin's ruthlessness. World War I ended according to the master plan of the 20th century Illuminati financiers. They knew that communism could only continue so long as capitalism supported it. The financiers also knew that the oppressive chains of the Treaty of Versailles would be broken by a leader who would eventually rise up from within Germany. Welcome to the first round of Problem, Reaction, and Solution. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, several captains of industry emerged in America. Andrew Carnegie made his fortune in steel production. Henry Ford excelled at making cars. John D. Rockefeller made the largest fortune in America through banking based on oil production. Many have speculated that the CFR is an acronym based on Carnegie, Ford, and Rockefeller. While this may not be the case, All three of these men have had a financial stake in the CFR, which was officially formed in New York in July 1921. Its logo features a rider on a white horse giving a Masonic salute.
Yeah,
The Latin word in the logo means everywhere.
Death.
The CFR in New York is the counterpart to the Royal Institute in London. Both groups are members of the Round Table groups. The same bankers which established the Federal Reserve in 1913 funded the CFR through dozens of tax-free foundations. If you want to catch a ride in the Anglo-American machinery of the Illuminati today, you will agree to be told what to do.
It's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
The goal of the Royal Institute and the CFR is nothing less than one world government. In 1950, CFR member James Warburg testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and said, "We shall have world government whether or not you like it, by conquest or consent." You would think that the CFR would be the talk of the American mainstream media, but the CFR dictates what will make the American news and how it will be presented to reporters
I
in
actually
key
have heard
positions
of-
who are along for the established.
I've heard of, in that who Norm makes fun of, Diane Sawyer I've heard of, and Dan Rather.
Right.
Where are we at timeline?
Following World War I, the League of Nations was the first popular attempt at creating a world government. The League was promoted as the way of providing a collective security, since an attack on any one member of the League would be considered an attack on all. The League failed as an organization, but acted as a successful stepping stone for the globalists. The League of Nations allowed the international bankers like J.D. Rockefeller to give more loans to more nations, provided the international bankers controlled the banking system of that nation. When the Bank for International Settlements was established in 1930, the Illuminati financiers gained more control of the world's money supply. This was all the more reason to start World War II. We must understand political Zionism up to World War I if we are to understand the entire foundation of the 20th century. Austrian Jew Theodor Herzl published a book in 1896 entitled The Jewish State. It proposed a Jewish state to cure the problem of anti-Semitism. The Rothschilds founded the Zionist Federation of Great Britain in 1897 to promote political Zionism with Theodor Herzl as president. We must stop our survey of political Zionism at this point to carefully define it. Political Zionism is the social movement which creates and sustains the physical nation of Israel. This definition is in the present tense because the territory of Israel is in a state of flux. Political Zionism is also the driver for world government through Israel in the tradition of the heretical Frankist Jews. This definition is embodied by the Rothschild family. Not all Jews are political Zionists. Not all political Zionists are Jews. The political Zionist movement feeds off Jews in the same way that the Nazi movement fed off Germans. Political Zionism is the greatest enemy of the Jews. Political Zionism.
Yeah, see, this actually might go into where the USS Liberty, because that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Why I can't see, like, and that's what I was saying. Where is there's something missing in that connection between America and Israel. That I don't like to cover up that there has to be a goal that they're both moving towards. But what is it? What exactly is it? Maybe this would explain, or at least give some kind of idea of which way to think, which tree to piss up, I guess.
The ultimate dialectic, and Theodor Herzl understood this. Frankism is the basis of political Zionism, which expressed itself in the Russian Revolution. Karl Marx's real name was Moses Mordecai Levy. Vladimir Lenin was born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, which is of Jewish lineage. Leon Trotsky's real name was Lev Davidovich Bronstein. The Rothschilds finally succeeded in making good on the threat to remove the Romanov dynasty from power through the Frankist Bolsheviks they controlled. Adolf Hitler was offered as the manufactured solution to the burden imposed upon Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. The event Hitler created to take control of Germany was engineered through a false flag attack. We now know that Hitler had his henchmen set fire to the German parliament, known as the Reichstag, in 1933. The fire was blamed on communist agent Marinus van der Lubbe in a huge show trial. In reality, van der Lubbe was a mentally handicapped individual picked up off the streets. Hitler's mighty war machine was funded and created by Wall Street. The Treaty of Versailles induced Germany to default on its debt. The Dawes Plan replaced the treaty after 5 years and allowed links to be made between American and German industry and finance. From the mid-1920s to the late 1930s, through the Bank of International Settlements, over $135 million was loaned to the German electrical, steel, and chemical industries from Wall Street. The profits on these loans were considerable. Without the technology for extracting petroleum from the German coal fields supplied by Rockefeller-owned Standard Oil of New Jersey, the Nazi war machine would have ran out of gas. One of the funders of the Nazi war machine...
This also explains to me something, because it was only really Churchill that was anti-Hitler. Like, I know people think that Britain reacted like immediately and overreacted to Hitler, but it isn't. If you actually, and I could never understand that when I was at school. Well, you kind of can understand it, because basically they took parts of Germany off of Germany, and Hitler, they were the places that Hitler took back, basically, and the powers that were. If when he done the first one, Britain had attacked, they'd have just stomped it out straight away. But none of the politicians, they was all kind of excusing it and kind of just letting him do it. And by the time he had retook, they even gave him a part back as well to try and stop him invading things. They gave him a part back, and then he invaded somewhere else, and they did nothing. Like, did nothing, gave him something. Like, they was doing everything. And if you just reacted when they started, then Hitler, that there would have been no... So yeah, maybe this is why Britain didn't do anything while he was... I mean, even though the Treaty of Versailles is crazy, it was crazy things in that, and kind of that created, like he said, that creates Hitler in itself. Like, that was ridiculous conditions put on Germany. But anyway, yeah.
Was Prescott Bush, father and grandfather of 2 U.S. presidents. According to files from the U.S. National Archives, Prescott Bush was a partner in Brown Brothers Harriman. This was one of the corporations used by industrialist Fritz Thyssen to move assets between America and Germany. Prescott Bush's assets in Union Banking Corporation were seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act in 1942, after America entered the war. The Bush family fortune was built in part from funding the very enemy that would kill over 400,000 American troops.
May I introduce our co-editors for this edition of the Longines Chronoscope. Our distinguished guest for this evening is the Honorable Prescott Bush, United States Senator from Connecticut.
I think we have made, just in this year, very marked and noticeable progress in connection with the Cold War. Included in that, too, should be our efforts to get at this subversion business within our own government.
The ideologies of the Nazis and the Communists were set against each other by the Illuminati financiers in a dialectical struggle. Both ideologies are flawed and use the same means to produce the same result. The Illuminati financiers chose to eliminate the Nazi movement and preserve communism for one very important reason. Hitler started to print money just like the Federal Reserve. At this point, all of Europe was tied up in war with itself. The problem and reaction stages of World War II would only be solved through America. America entered World War II based on the Pearl Harbor attack that was allowed to happen and deliberately made worse. The Japanese signals indicating the time, place, and resources to be used in the attack were remotely intercepted and sent to President Roosevelt. President Roosevelt chose not to relay the information to Pearl Harbor. America now had the excuse to attack Germany, even though Germany never attacked America. The Japanese were ready to surrender in February 1945, but 2 nuclear bombs were dropped on them after this date instead of being used in Europe. The madness of World War II accomplished several things for the Illuminati financiers. Profits could be generated by rebuilding Japan and using it to provide cheap labor to flood America with inexpensive goods. This would accelerate the long-term planned process of bringing down America, just as China is being used to help finish the job today. Communism was allowed to consume half of Europe in order to lock America and the Soviet Union in a new dialectical struggle and a new opportunity for profit. Most importantly, World War II paved the way to create the United Nations and the Nation of Israel.
And
It must be
Pakistan.
noted that the top 4 players of World War II had ties to the occult. Hitler was deeply involved in the black arts. He joined a group focused on esoteric teachings called the Thule Society. This is where the logo for the Nazi Party came from. The occult foundation of Nazi philosophy was laid by Dietrich Eckart, not by Adolf Hitler. Joseph Stalin was involved in Freemasonry. Here we see him giving the same sign of the hidden hand, the same hand sign of Freemasons Napoleon and Solomon Rothschild. Franklin Roosevelt was a 32nd degree Mason. Winston Churchill was a member of 2 Masonic lodges, including a Druidic lodge. When you look at a photograph of the 3 main characters involved at the Yalta Conference in February 1945, keep in mind that all 3 were Freemasons.
Yeah, the Freemasons is I recommend people look into them if you haven't. Freemasons, yeah, is crazy. But the whole communist thing, yeah, it makes sense why you pick. If you want to control the population, communism's better than fascism because it's not as outright control as fascism. People will rebel against fascism eventually. I mean, they will rebel against communism when their children are starving, and but really, you have no power at all, and you'll just get stomped out. Um, but yeah, you can see why the elite chose communism over fascism. It's the same as when people say Christianity was made to control people. If that's the case, then why aren't the elites pushing Christianity? Why are they pushing Islam? If you want to control a population with an ideology, with a religion, then the best one to do it, the one where you take most people's freedoms away is Islam. So you can see why they side with Islam. You can see why they side with communism. The whole thing of Christianity being used to control people, it's like I don't think you've read the Bible at all. It's really got nothing to do with being controlled by any earthly man or fearing any earthly man. I think the most common phrase in the Bible is "Don't be afraid." Nothing is said more than "Don't be afraid." But yeah, this is crazy. And like I say, I always wondered that. I always could never wonder when I learnt about the history of World War Two um, at school. I couldn't understand why, because even the teachers would tell you that if Britain had reacted instantly when Hitler started taking back parts of Germany, there'd have been no Second World War. But the British government just did nothing, just did nothing, just did nothing. And the only person who was made a political outcast for it was Winston Churchill. He was the only one voicing an opinion of anti-Hitler. But then you go on to he's like all three of them sat there as Freemasons. You had Bush and what's his name, both Skull and Bones, both running for it's kind of funny how controlled everything is, really, when you think about it. It's like, yeah. But yeah, that's this part. Sweet.